Welcome, everybody, to the Jim Masters Show Live. How are you and you all around the world? It's great to have you with us today. We are live globally with our international, interactive, viewer-centric entertainment lifestyle talk show series, broadcasting from the greater New York City area in southern New England, between New York and Boston, and the United States of America, where the clocks went back last night an hour. So for some of you in other parts of the world who are like, is the show on? What happened? You're not on? Our clocks went back. We got a nice extra hour of sleep and rest, and we took advantage of it today, as I think most people did here in these time zones where our clock goes back the hour on November 1st. So it is 7 p.m. Eastern here. And if your clocks say anything different, you might have to change them in the time zones where, of course, those hours are changing back for the hour for that nice extra sleep we got. How is everybody? Hope you had a good weekend. And we had a very busy weekend as well. There was a television project we were working on that popped up last minute on Saturday. Hope you had a wonderful Halloween. For those of you that celebrate Halloween, we've got an amazing week of guests coming up, extraordinary guests literally from all over the world. I do want to let you know tomorrow we are on at a very special time with a very special guest. We have international classical Irish flautist Emir McGowan. She's going to be here performing live and direct from London. Our show tomorrow, which is Monday, will be on at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. Western European time, which will be 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, and England. So we're going to be on much earlier than our normal time, which is 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, because we wanted to accommodate the opportunity for her to be able to have her fans and viewers watching while she's here on our show. So we're going to have folks watching in Europe and around the world live, as well as here in the States and in Canada. So it's going to be really cool. It's going to be international. So tomorrow, again, the show, a very special time, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. That's when our show will be on tomorrow, 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, England. I believe Netherlands will be 9 p.m., Germany, 9 p.m. as well. So it's going to be really cool. She's extraordinary. I've known her for a long time. We were part of a public television special called Celtic Heart that was filmed in Maine and Ireland last year that aired on public television stations with composer Tim Janis. And we've also done things at Carnegie Hall together, and it's just really fantastic. So she's here tomorrow. And Oscar Blue, who's an extraordinary, very popular Irish performer, singer, songwriter. He's got a new CD out. He is here next Saturday, and that is 3 p.m. as well, next Saturday, the 7th of November, live, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, England. Now, tomorrow's show, as well as next Saturday, will be exclusively on YouTube. So make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Jim Masters TV, because again, the broadcast is going to be happening exclusively on YouTube, not Facebook. So if you look for us on Facebook, you won't see us doing the show on Facebook. It's an exclusive promotion we have with YouTube that's going to be really cool. So look for us on YouTube tomorrow. We're on YouTube all the time. We do the show on YouTube, but tomorrow, especially 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. Western European time, exclusively on the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to Jim Masters TV on YouTube, subscribe, click the notification bell so you don't miss anything. So hope you guys are doing well. All your characters are here. Yes, we'll show you some of them, but here's George Burns. I know you guys always look for George Burns, and he is here, and he had a good weekend. He slept in. Gilligan is here as well with love from Dream of Denver, Bob Denver's wife, who sent us this after she was a guest on the show. Aloha, Jim, Dream of Denver. Gilligan's here, and all the rest of the cast of characters. We'll show them a little bit later. But we hope you're doing well. We thank you for joining us once again as we continue our exclusive series here of entertainment and light, love, levity, as we always call it. A word we sort of coined here on the show that you guys love. You guys call yourselves the viewers or the lovities. You call me Mr. Levity, and you welcome all the guests on the show as lovities. And I think that's pretty cool. Let's tell you about the very special guest we have coming up, which we're really excited about. He is a prolific voice actor, announcer, and you've heard his voice in multiple productions. And he's a veteran and really a legend in the industry. And I'm very excited to have him here. Neil Ross. Now, if you're familiar with his work, maybe you've read his new book, which is absolutely outstanding, and it's a page turner. Chances are you've heard the voices of Neil Ross announcing an Oscar or Emmy winner, portraying beloved cartoon characters in iconic 80s and 90s TV shows like Transformers and G.I. Joe and Voltron and Spider-Man, chronicling a mission to Mars, or the Wright brothers' first flight on the PBS series Nova, playing voice roles in major motion pictures like Back to the Future Part 2 and Dick Tracy, and in top-rated television shows such as Seinfeld, or voicing characters in popular video games like Metal Gear Solid and Call of Duty, Doom 3 and Mass Effect. You may even remember him introducing your favorite hit record. Neil's early career saw him living the roller coaster of life, mostly AM radio, top 40 DJ in the heyday of that format in the 60s and 70s, at top stations in Honolulu, San Diego, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And in the 80s, the early 80s, Neil segued into the world of voiceover, and then little known industry back then that was nearly impossible to break into. But break into it he did. And since then, Neil has been active in all areas of this fascinating business, voicing thousands of cartoons, commercials, promos, documentaries, movie, television, video game characters, and so much more. And Neil Ross has been behind the microphone for over 50 years and is still going strong. We're very excited, live and direct from California, to welcome our very special guest, Neil Ross. There you are, Neil, live and in the flesh. How are you, my friend? And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So I asked you before when we were chatting in preparation for the show, are you busy now? Are things slow? How have you been staying creative and connected through, this sort of unusual year that we've all been dealing with?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have. I'm racked with guilt because I know there are people out there going through unimaginable difficulties of all sizes and shapes. I'm kind of okay, okay financially. And it's an odd thing for someone who spent his whole life in the entertainment business, but I'm kind of an introvert.
Yeah.
So some days when I get up and go, I don't have to go anywhere or talk to anybody. This is great. I got to admit, at this point, even I am getting a little squirrely. But how busy am I? Not that much, to be honest with you. I'm knocking things out from my home studio, but it's relatively quiet at the moment, and we'll just have to see what happens when this thing runs its course.
Absolutely. I'm very fascinated about your career because it spins a career that is extraordinary, and you have really touched in so many different areas within our industry and as a fellow broadcaster. And that's really where you started, right? As a broadcaster first, and then the voiceover career, which has been prolific, came second. How did you first make your entree into broadcasting? Were you always, a kid that was fascinated by radio stations and DJs and announcers and TV and all? What were some of those first inspirations for you, Neil?
Well, as a kid, I was raised in Canada, and we didn't have a television set until I got to be about 12 years old. So it was mostly the radio and my little record player, my little collection of records. But I would tune around the radio, and I was not particularly interested in music at that point. I found it very boring. And so I would tune in to hear people talk, and I found myself fascinated by the different voices that you would hear and the different accents. And I just spontaneously began trying to reproduce those. And it was almost like a hobby or an obsession. My father thought I was weird, and my kid sits in his room and talks to himself. What have I done wrong? But
were you reading the side of the milk cartons and everything too, or?
I would get the funny papers on Sunday, and I would do all the characters. That was my script,
Yeah.
And then one wondrous day, I discovered this incredible new music. This song came on the radio that absolutely electrified me from my toenails to the top of my head. I'd never felt anything like this before. And that song was Tutti Frutti by a guy named Little Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And Little Richard kind of changed my life because now I wanted to hear more of this stuff. I didn't know if there was any more. I thought, this might be the only record ever that sounds this good, you know. But I thought, well, there are some other songs that are in the same genre, if you will. And so now I became a hunter of music on the AM band. And I began to listen to top 40 stations. Then we moved to California. We were in Long Beach in the Los Angeles area. And wonders of wonders, in January of 1958, this radio station flipped its format and became KFWB, Color Channel 98. I mean, how hip.
Yeah.
Color television was coming. It was sort of rumored. I don't think it existed at that point, at least not in any great amount, but to have a radio station that described itself as in television terms, color channel, not channel 98. Wow.
Right.
They played all this top 40 music, and they had this amazing lineup of DJs who sounded like they were having a ball. And I was just in hog heaven listening to this. And over time, I began to fixate on this one particular guy whose name was Bill Balance. And he was on from 9 to midnight, and he really was a fantastic talent. And it's a shame. Later, he got into talk radio. He did a show called The Feminine Forum that was brilliant. And if the technology had existed at the time to roll him out nationwide, I think he would have been a huge phenomenon. But technology was not in place, so he was in Los Angeles only. And eventually the FCC cracked down and made him stop what he was. They punished him for what other guys, imitators, were doing. It wasn't what Bill was brilliant, but people would try to imitate him and they just didn't have it. It's like somebody tried to imitate, a famous comedian. No, there's only one guy who does that.
That's it.
Anyway, I was a huge fan of Bill Balance. And now I'm about 15, 16 years old, and I haven't got a clue what to do with my life. My parents are predicting doom and gloom and failure, and so are most of my teachers, and I don't know what would have become of me. But one night I'm listening to Bill Balance, and he goes into this rap about, well, I'm off the air in about 20 minutes, going to hop into my new convertible sports car and pick up my starlet girlfriend. She's under contract at Warner Brothers, and she and I are going to cruise the Strip. And I'm lying there in bed in Ocean Beach, San Diego, saying, this is the life I want.
This is what I want.
This is what and I didn't even know what cruising the Strip meant, but I wanted to do it, whatever it was. And this little light bulb went off at the top of my head and said, maybe I could be a disc jockey. I did kind of crack my friends up in the lunch court with little dirty stories. And, I had some kind of a personality. I thought I could do that. And, it began as sort of an idle thought in the middle of the night, but like a little tiny ember, I nurtured it and made it grow. And ultimately, it became a roaring fire, and I became completely obsessed with radio. And I had to get in the radio business. And so I did.
Yeah.
That's how it began.
Who are some of the folks in the industry that you maybe admired, looked up to, or that were just people that when you heard their voice or you saw them? Because a lot of people, especially in the earlier years, there was a lot of dabble between radio, and then when television came out, they were now announcing for television stations and booth announcers, things like that as well. Were there any that in those early years that really stood out for you, some of those voices?
I wasn't that interested in the booth announcers. By that, we mean the guys that you used. Well, I guess they still do it at the top and the bottom of the hour. It used to be a job. A guy would be there for 8 hours, and for 28 minutes out of every half hour, he just had nothing to do. But when at the top and bottom of the hour, this is CBS. And maybe that's all he did, but that was his job.
Yeah, I used to love that. I wanted that job. I think everybody did.
A lot of guys did. But no, I was fascinated by DJs. I began tuning up and down the dial, listening to every guy I could. I discovered a station in San Diego, actually had a glass studio, with a window. You could stand in the street and look up and actually watch the DJ and see everything that he did. And I haunted that corner. It was 7th and Ash in San Diego. That studio isn't there anymore, but I would stand there on that street corner and watch what those guys were doing and watch them talk into that beautiful silver microphone and say, oh, someday, man, I want to be right where he is, doing exactly what he's doing. Those were really my heroes. I was not that fixated on, network guys or anything like that.
It was more of the personalities that you were hearing on the radio. So for you, what was that early break then, where the door opened and they said, come on in, sit down and let's talk?
You mean as far as radio?
Yeah, the radio opportunity.
Well, I had a silly little adventure in Arizona that only lasted a couple of weeks. And I was very lucky because as they were firing me, the phone was ringing and someone in Salt Lake City wanted to hire me. So, my gosh, of course. And off I go to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And at some point I said to the program director, fishing for a compliment, I said, why out of all the many people who applied for the position here was I chosen? And he said, you are the only guy who would work for minimum wage. And that my early radio mentor, a guy named Otto Miller, had told me the way to break in the business is find somebody stupid or desperate enough to hire you. And he said, once you get in, you take it from there. And so that literally, I was the only guy who would work for minimum wage. And they said, fine, come on.
And what were some of those early things that you did? Did you have a midnight to 6 a.m. shift or that late night shift in the beginning?
No, we signed off from midnight to 5. I did 7 to midnight for a while, and then they moved me into the daytime. And my gosh, by the end of my tenure there, I was in afternoon drive, as they call it.
Yeah. What was the format?
It was top 40.
It was top 40, yeah. How long were you there?
About a year.
And then another opportunity came, or did you say, okay, it's time to move up in the markets?
Well, what I discovered, and to explain it might take too long, but at the time, in order to make the jump from a smaller station to, say, a medium station, which then would lead you to an even bigger station, you really needed to have a first-class FCC license.
That's right.
And so I decided to quit the station and go to Burbank, where they had a school where the guy who was supposedly absolutely phenomenal would get you through the test in about 6 weeks. And so that's what I did. And
so then that got you in there. Yeah.
Well, after that, I had to look for a job because I was practically broke. And at the school, he had a book in the lobby. Guy's name was Bill Ogden, one of the most unforgettable people I ever met. And if there are any old radio guys watching this, they're saying, oh, yeah, Bill Ogden. I know him. Anyway, people knew he cranked out DJs with first-class licenses, radio stations. So they'd write letters saying, do you have any people who are graduating? And because we're looking for somebody with a ticket, as they used to call it. So he had this book in the lobby, which had all these letters. And anybody, if you'd ever been a student of his, even if it was 20 years ago, you could walk in and look through that book if you were looking for a job. So there was this letter in there with a big Indian chief's head with a headdress and the chief station. And it was a station in Lewiston, Idaho. And I used to joke with my fellow students, I wonder who's going to have to go there. It turned out it was me. And I went to what the late, great Tom Big Daddy Donahue described as electronic Siberia. It's where you have to go those first couple of jobs. It's usually snowing and not much fun.
And you're the one shoveling the driveway out as well.
pretty much. I was supposed to go out and take these readings on the towers, and the owner of the station had his horses in the same area where the towers for this. So, I'm out there in the darkness with my flashlight, and this horse is suddenly looming out of the darkness.
God, that's funny. This
is not as glamorous as I thought it would be. Did Bill Balance ever have to dodge horses? Where does Cruising the Strip start?
Right. We had a couple of instances where we were on the air at an AM FM in Connecticut, and all of a sudden the snowstorm came, and it turned out, our cars were there. I was on the FM, the colleague was on the AM, and then there was the production director, doing commercials in the production studio. And then all of a sudden the snow was coming, and it wasn't stopping. And all three of us were snowed in. The cars were buried. I mean, you couldn't even see the cars. So the program director and the chief engineer and the general manager had called, and they said, that you guys are going to be staying there, right? And you guys have to stay on the air until further notice, because people are depending on these stations to deliver news and emergency alert warnings and road closures and all of this stuff. So that's what we ended up doing. And it was all night long, and it was whatever we were ripping from, the newswire and all of the emergency alert bell signals we were getting. And most people would say, and you'll appreciate this, boy, that must have been a drag. You were stuck at work overnight, and there was like nothing going on, and you couldn't leave, and you're at your job. And like, it was the most exhilarating time, because we were on the air nonstop, putting it together. All the music stopped on the FM. You couldn't do the mute. You had to just stay on live and keep giving people updates. And so it turned out to be a major blizzard. And it was exhilarating. And now we all look back at it like, what a cool thing that was to be a part of that, and people depending on you to deliver whatever you can put together. And have you had moments like that where it's been a little bit crazy at the studios?
Oh yeah, no, I've never really been involved in a natural disaster like a blizzard or a hurricane or anything. I've talked to guys who did. A friend of mine was in Miami, and they had a big one come through, and he was sort of in the same situation you were in, only it was just him, and he was trying to keep this station on the air, and the water was pouring in through the doors, and the water level was rising to 5 or 6 inches, and if it rose another 2 inches, it would hit the transmitter and probably
take everything out.
Electrocuted my friend. At some point, someone connected with the station called him and said, "Shut it down and get out of there," and he did. But
yeah.
No, the only ones I remember are news, breaking news. And usually the news is not good, but I do remember the camaraderie of everybody showing up, and you're just flailing, editing tapes, doing everything you can to get the stuff on the air. And hours go by in seconds. And when it's all over, you really know you've been through something.
Is there a story or anything you remember having to break or announce that stands out for you over the years?
Well, I remember when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. I was in Honolulu at what was then KGMB Radio and Television and FM. Although FM, this was, 66 when that happened? Anyway.
60, 68, 60, 67?
No, wait a minute. It was 68. That's when all
Luther King was,
all the horrible stuff happened in 68. And so, but even then, FM was kind of a rumor. It was just these two tapes that went round and round in this room.
Beautiful music, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, all the news guys had done the 10 o'clock news, and they were off to the various watering holes that they like to frequent. And suddenly the UPI machine goes ding, 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 ding. Like either the thing is broken or something big is happening. Here was this bulletin. So basically, I was running around bulletining it on the AM, bulletining it on the television, and then as an afterthought, bulletining it on the FM, and running around in circles until the news guys got back in, and then we started doing it, for real. And I was there till, God, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. It was
amazing. Yeah, amazing. Very emotional time for everybody. Tell us about some of the other journeys, some of the other stations and opportunities that came along the way for you, Neil, throughout your career as you moved up.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. I was not in Idaho very long, and I sent tapes out to stations in California and heard nothing. As a Hail Mary, I sent a tape to a station in Honolulu that I had a slight connection with.
Any East Coast stations at all?
No, I was not trying to get to the East. I always wanted do a little time in New York, and I never did. I went to a radio school in New York, but I never worked in New York, and I always wanted to, and it just didn't happen. But anyway, here I am, miserable in Idaho, and I'm looking out the window, and the snow is falling, and the phone is ringing, and I thought, oh, do I want to talk to one more idiot? All right, I'll pick it up. And it was a guy in sunny Hawaii offering me a job, and I said, wow.
Good thing you picked that lineup.
Yeah. How'd you like to come over and do noon to 3? I said, well, that sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
I'm playing hard to get. I said, what would you pay a fella to do that for you? And he said, we pay $300 a month. I said, I think we have a bad connection. Maybe a whale bumped into the phone line. It sounded like you said 300. He said, that's what I said. I said, I'm getting $450 here. He said, well, that 300 is what we pay. And I said, will you at least pay for my trip over? No, we don't pay for the trip over there. That's it, $300 a month. Are you coming or not? I think I'm going to have to turn you down. I was practically in tears. You know?
Yeah. What an opportunity.
And then he hit me with the clincher. He said, we have studios overlooking the pool at the Waikiki Biltmore Hotel. I said, I'll be there in 2 weeks.
That's their version of the Strip.
It wasn't as glamorous as it sounded, unfortunately, but I'm still glad I went. I have 5 years in Honolulu. That was wonderful.
5 years. Yeah. That's amazing. Wow. And then from there, what happened? Did you came back to, did you go to LA?
No, from Honolulu, it was San Diego, where I worked for KCBQ, which was the station in the glass window that I had watched so many years ago. Unfortunately, they were no longer in the glass window. They had moved out to the transmitter site in Santee. But all the equipment that I had looked at, that was out there. I actually did get to talk into that big silver microphone, same microphone, RCA 77DX, I think. And
right.
All the equipment was the same, so I got my grubby little hands on the equipment. I just didn't get to sit up in that big glass window.
Now, when you were in San Diego, did you dabble at all with lending your voice to any of the television stations?
No, I didn't do any of that, but I started to really blossom in the production studio. And that's when the seed for voiceover was sown, because I began to discover that I had kind of a flair for production. Yeah. Which I should explain, in most radio stations, at least back then, there were 2 studios. One was the air studio where the disc jockey did his or her thing. Then there's the production studio, or the production room, and that is where commercials and promos are produced. And I seem to shine in there. I seem to really be better in there than I was in the air studio. Most disc jockeys detest production work. It's work. You know, they got into radio to have fun. This is not fun. I have to type labels and put them on cartridges, and I don't.
Yeah. And you just have to splice tape too.
Yes. But I love the fact that you got do-overs. You know, live radio, you try to do it, you screw it up, it's gone. Even if it's wonderful, it's gone down the stream. Everybody forgets about it in 20 minutes. But if you create a really clever commercial or promo, it airs over and over and over again, and you get do-overs. You can really work on something and make it as good as, time and your talent permit. And I started to really enjoy that. And that's when I started really paying attention to the people that I heard doing national television commercials, national radio commercials, people voicing cartoons, because I fooled around with little character voices on the air, and I began to ask myself, who are these people? It became like a Seinfeld bit. Who are these people? And I had this working theory that they must be on camera people moonlighting for a couple extra bucks, which was probably true in some cases. But I had no idea that voiceovers existed. Nobody knew back then. It was one of the best kept secrets in show business. And one day I'm talking to a record promoter, and he just let slip this phrase or expression, voiceovers, and scarcely daring to dream, I said, what are voiceovers? And he said, commercials, promos, cartoons, voiceovers. And I said, can you make a living just doing that? You make a living. And he cited a guy named Danny Dark, who was a fabulously successful announcer.
NBC and
Oh,
Yeah.
voice of General Foods, voice of General Motors, voice of NBC. He said,
Mm.
Dark's a millionaire. He lives in Beverly Hills, make a living. And I thought, God, that's what I ought to be doing. Because I was coming to the conclusion, I was only using about 40% of what I had in radio. And I thought that if there's anything where I could pretty much hit 100%, it's got to be voiceovers. I've got to get in this business. It took me another 10 years to do anything about it, but that's when the seed was sown. And that's, as I said, when I began to pay attention
Yeah.
to these people that you mentioned and others.
So the Ernie Andersons, the Hal Douglases, the Don LaFontaine, of course, the movie trailers all these years. Fortunately, we lost him, but so there was real deep sound. You and I were talking before we went on the air about that real voice of God, deep announcer sounds that we always heard on the air. Used to love following those people that did that. For you, when you started to dive into voiceover work, was it initially doing commercials and promos? When did you start to make that slide into animation and cartoons and video games and characters?
Well, just before I left San Diego to then go to San Francisco for a year and then down to LA for 7 and then out of the business. But I was involved in a radio comedy show that lasted for about a year. And basically the guy that I worked with, he played the lead character. We had a wonderfully talented woman who played all the female characters, and I played the entire supporting cast other than that. And it was the first time I'd ever tried to create a bunch of characters and play them in a sustaining way and act and the whole thing. And, you know, people loved the show, but again, I really was nobody objective to that I could go to and say, am I kidding myself? Is this at all competitive, or is it just fine for local yokels? And then that's just, but it sort of gave me hope that I might have a shot at animation. And when I did get to LA, I had a meeting with an agent. He didn't sign me, but he listened to I had 2 demos. One was straight announce, and the other was animation. And he listened to the straight announce for about 25 seconds, snapped it off, stood to his feet, glared at me, and with the same tone of voice you would use to say child molester, he said, "You sound like a goddamn radio announcer." And I said, what is the problem with that? And it took me a long time and many years to find the answer and what to do about it. But then he listened to the animation reel and he perked up. He said, this is good. I could sell this. This I could work with. But then he said, it's hopeless. Hanna-Barbera, they hire the same 6 people over and over again. You'll never get in there. All right, good luck, kid. Well, he did me one solid. He recommended a workshop, which I attended, which was a great workshop, and that got me started. So I owe him that. But the fact that he liked what was on the animation reel really gave me hope. I thought maybe I've got something going in that area. And the 2 areas that I had the most success with initially were animation and narration. Now, the narrations that I was doing were nothing prestigious. They were like sales presentations that would play for maybe 6 salesmen somewhere.
Right.
Or your benefits as an employee of Flegman Industries. I'm sure you've done this kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, we're number 1, always.
Some poor devil gets hired and they put him in a conference room and say, here, watch this. You know, your benefits as an employee. And the guy's asleep in 5 minutes, you know. But the reason that I was good at that stuff was because for many years in radio, I had to do newscasts in my own radio show. So you put on a 2-minute Paul Revere and the Raiders record and you run down the hall and you go to the AP wire machine and you rip off a 5-minute summary and you look at it real fast to see if there's any typos. And then bang, you're on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, it's news time. And the news would be as big a shock to me as it was to the audience because I hadn't read it previously. But I got real good at sounding like not only do I know everything that's here, I wrote this and I researched it. And I'm an absolute expert in this stuff. And that, I think, is what got me rolling in narrations, was I just sort of sounded like I was authoritative and knew what I was talking about. So those were the two areas where I began to have some success, more or less right off the bat. Commercials took much longer. I'm still working on commercials.
Yeah.
I know there's an answer out there somewhere. We were talking before we went on about, well, maybe do you want to get into that whole business about announcers versus spokespersons? And
Right, exactly. I think it's a good area because, like you said about hearing that about the announcer voice, I've heard that as well. A couple of times, depending on what the project is, like when you and I were chatting before it went live on the air, how we were trained, as professional broadcasters, radio, television, the whole thing, that whatever the material was, whether it's a commercial or a promo, and I've always loved promo announcing. I always love that, tonight on NBC or this just in or Eyewitness News, that good heavy duty promo stuff. I just really love the energy of promo material. But the announcing versus just the voice acting and the differences and nuances between the two. We were trained initially to be that announcer on, WXYZ or, KSEY or what have you. And there was a certain something to that. And you were trained that way. You're delivering entertainment and news, and it's very important. And a lot of people are there and counting on it. So when a script would come and you're doing an audition, maybe for a regular commercial or whatever it is, public service announcement, anything, the inclination in the beginning would to be that announcer to add weight and importance to just about every word that's on that script, and that would want that. They would want not that off the street sound. They want somebody who has a polish and a smoothness and can finesse the words and inflect and articulate, build. And you'll have where you go in and you'll read it that sometimes I'll read it that way first. And there are some gigs where that is what they're looking for because it matches whatever that project is. But a lot of times it's more of just read it. Don't even, now that we're going to have you do it twice because you're a broadcaster. So we're going to have you read it in front of us and you're going to be an announcer. We know this. You're going to read it as an announcer. Now read it again. However, not so easy. I was told, and I'm sure you probably can expand on this, that it's harder sometimes for people who were trained that way as those announcers, as those broadcasters, to strip that versus never had that and try to do that sound. It's harder because it's so ingrained in us to add so much gravitas to the words that are in front of us.
Well, what we learned to do was something that the late, great Dawes Butler, a highly respected talent and coach, described as the cosmetic read. And it's great for local radio. They're terrified of the sponsor getting mad. So they don't want you to screw anything up, and they want it nice and smooth and very professional and get that phone number in. And I was advised early on, learn how to sight read, practice this. And because there was a lot of live copy back then. Eventually they started pre-recording everything, which is a shame. But anyway, so I got to the point where I could read a live 60 and it would sound smooth as silk. And I could, in my mind, I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner, and maybe I'll go to a movie after that. I'm paying no attention, but I'm reading it very, very professionally and very smoothly, and everybody's thrilled. And that's not what they want when it comes to national radio and television commercials. Even back in 78, not an announcer is what it said at the bottom of every piece of copy. And that's the reason the agent was so angry with me for sounding like a radio announcer. What you suddenly have to do is what you haven't been doing, and that is really pay attention to what the hell you're reading. What's being imparted here? And rather than sound like a stentorian, authoritative voice telling you something, instead you need to sound like the guy next door,
right? Just
leaning over the back fence going, you know what, buddy? You really should have life insurance. I mean, imagine if you're gone, Phyllis and the kids. You really need to do this. or whatever the product is. And sometimes, and it's devilishly difficult because most of these commercials are written, they're commercials,
Right. Right.
Lots of bargains today. Come on down. How do you make that sound like a guy talking over a back fence? But somehow you have to find a way to do it. And
how were you able to make that transition being a broadcaster?
It was slow and painful. There's a wonderful voice coach out here named Maurice Tobias, and she refers to guys like me as recovering broadcasters.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know that I've ever completely cracked it. I think, I just too many damn years in radio, but I sure gave it my best shot. And a lot of it was, you realize you have to become something of an actor.
That's what it is.
I have no problem in cartoons. I know how to read the line because I'm a character. There's a story. There's a plot. Of course, you read the line this way. He's angry, or he's sad, or he's frightened. Of course, But how do you take 60 seconds of copy and I began to realize these are monologues. And here was an incredible moment. I took an acting class in Hollywood. I was an embarrassment. I was horrible, but it was not without value. A guy gets up one day to do a monologue, and he's not very good. And he finishes, and the teacher says, "Let me ask you a question. Have you read the play that this monologue comes from?" And the guy said, "No." And he said, "Well, I would suggest you read the entire play from start to finish and then come back and try to do this." And I thought, well, yes, of course. If it's such a thing were possible, if an actor existed who'd never heard of Hamlet, you could hand him the to be or not to be monologue and he would do a serviceable job. But unless well, my dad died and his ghost appeared to me and my mother married my schmuck uncle and I don't know what to do. Now you've got some motivation. And, some actors will create a whole backstory for their character that takes them right up to the moment where they make their first entrance in the play or the movie. And so I realized this is what I have to do with commercials if I can. I have to create some sort of a backstory that gives me motivation to say the things that are on this page. So that's really what I started to work on. And it was a long, painstaking process. And as I said, it's still ongoing. And some copy, as you know, is so relentlessly retail. It's just not a damn thing you can do with it.
Right.
And sometimes they don't want you to. Sometimes they want you to just do the retail read.
Yeah, sell the sizzle and
yeah. And then promos, as you mentioned, they're a whole other world. I mean, they I remember watching Chuck Riley. You remember him? He was the voice of CBS for a while. I remember watching him one night, just banging them out one after another after another. His timing was just unbelievable. Now with the digital equipment, if you screw up, they can fix it. But in Chuck's day, you had to hit it right on the nose. I mean, and I'm talking nanoseconds. And he was so good at that. Ernie too, I think Ernie Anderson.
ABC, right.
But that's kind of a different. It's a kind of acting, It's you mentioned Don LaFontaine, and there was an interesting guy because he was the king of the movie trailers for
in a world
for about, God, I don't know, 15 years. I mean, I would go to the movies and they'd run the trailer. They'd run 6 trailers back to back. He's in every one of them. I swear this is a true story. We had some people over. I forget who they were. They were not in the business, but at a certain point, the husband says, "Oh, let's ask Neil, honey, because he's in that business. He'll know." He said, "Who is the guy who does all the movie announcements? Is that he does everything? Is that like a government job?" No, it's not a government job. But this, and I would hear guys who had equivalent voices to Don's, and they'd go, "I don't know why he's got all this work. I couldn't do that." But I wouldn't argue with them, but what the key to Don was, for years before he ever attempted to step in front of a microphone, he wrote and produced movie trailers. He directed other actors, voice actors.
Yeah.
So when he looked at a piece of copy, he saw things that the rest of us just won't see because we've never tried to produce these things. We've never tried to write them.
Right.
That background enabled him when he said "Die Hard." He was standing next to Bruce Willis with a gun in his hand. He didn't sound like an announcer. Die Hard. And that, I think that was a big key to the secret of his success.
Mm,
That background.
having had that background, exactly. So it lent beautifully to that sound. And then we were talking about how celebrities have also, over the years, come into the world of voiceover, and whether it's narration or it is commercials, promos, what have you, documentary voices. Some amazing, fabulous voices on PBS, with Nature and Nova, and you've done work with Nova, right, on PBS?
Yeah, I did. I'm forgetting out somewhere, but around 25 Novas.
Something with the Wright brothers, and then there was one on Mars. So what was that like, having an opportunity to do something, as illustrious as PBS's Nova?
Well, I was over the moon. I used to watch Nova when I was a lowly disc jockey in San Diego, and could never have even dreamed that I might someday narrate the show. I thought it was a wonderful show. And also one of my early heroes, going all the way back to high school, was a guy named Alexander Scorby, who was a wonderful narrator and actor. And so, I was just over the moon to work for Nova, and they were probably the most professional people I ever worked with. In a lot of cases, I did not hear this. I was told about it by my parents. They claim that they heard it. It was an interview with James Earl Jones, and the interviewer said, "Well, you're doing voiceovers now. I suppose that's an easy buck." And Jones is, according to my parents, said, "No, it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do." And really, why? He says, "Well, when you do a film or a play, you have months to prepare and ready yourself. Voiceovers, you walk in a studio, they hand you a script and expect you to perform instantly.
Right. Very
difficult." And this is what would happen with a lot of narrations. I mean, here's the copy. Take a look. Okay, you ready? And in you go, and it's like those newscasts. This is all news to me, folks. But Nova was wonderful. They would send a rough cut of the show about a week in advance. There might be a few little changes by the time I did it, but at least I'm looking at the show. I'm listening to the music they're using. I get a feel for the mood, and they sent the script. So I have a whole week with the script and the video. If I'm not prepared when I walk in, that's on me. They've done their part. And so, they were delightful to work for. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Merlin, who's watching in Canada, if everybody has any questions, shoot them on YouTube, Facebook. Did you listen to Wolfman Jack over the years?
Oh, sure. Yeah. He was on XERB, which later became XEPRS, the Mighty Soul Express, baby. And in fact, I went down with a buddy of mine, and we watched them put the show together. Wolfman was not live. They had this ingenious way of making it sound like he was live, but it was all done with tapes and tape cartridges, and this one engineer who was really good. And Wolfman was up in Hollywood. He would cut tracks, and they would send them down there somehow. But he was quite. He was probably the most unique disc jockey I ever heard. And he was able to do something that really only. There may be others that I'm not aware of, but really only Howard Stern is the other one who's managed, and that's somehow created a visual to go along with the act.
Right.
Howard grew his hair long and started dressing like a rock star. Wolfman created that whole Wolfman persona. In fact, initially, he was a big mystery. And there was actually an article in Rolling Stone where the writer tried to track him down. And he said, "I got as close as talking to his manager, Bob Smith." Well, of course, Bob Smith was Wolfman Jack. But he kind of put the voice on, so he could sort of talk normally. So this guy interviewed Wolfman and didn't even know it. He's quoting this Bob Smith who says, "Well, the Wolfman lives in Mexico and he's kind of secretive and this and that." But eventually, he was actually afraid because he he didn't know if people would be upset with him because he wasn't black, because a lot of people thought he was black.
There was black, right?
And he finally put this whole look together with the beard and the hair. And now when he did personal appearances, it wasn't like, oh God, is that what he looks like? You know, like, oh yeah, that is the Wolfman. Yeah.
That is him. She also asks if you've done work with Disney.
Little bit here and there, not that much. No.
Yeah. Would you like to, if that opportunity came?
Sure, absolutely.
Sure,
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be delightful. But well, there's still time. They haven't nailed the lid down yet.
Wow. I want to, we have a couple of quick clips here too, and some photos and a lot of cool stuff I want to show people so they can actually hear some of the sound. This one is, looks like Spider-Man back in 1994. And you did one of the characters. Was it Norman?
I was both Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's hear some of that, folks. Here is Neil at work.
Norman, don't you understand? I'm your friend.
There was only one true goblin, the Green Goblin! I'm the Green Goblin, not that you live long enough for it to matter, for justice is blind no longer!
No. Not again.
I'm your friend, Norman.
You're not my friend. You're some monster.
No, the others. They're the monsters. Kingpin, the Hobgoblin, Spider-Man. They're all trying to hurt you, squeeze you, crush you.
Yes, that's exactly what they're doing to me.
And that's why you should let me stop them.
It would be wrong.
Wrong is what they're doing to you!
And what they want to do to Harry.
I can't.
You can! You must!
Let me out, Norman. Let me out now!
No, no, no!
I used to leave those sessions with a splitting headache.
Did you?
Yeah.
Just because of what you had to do.
A little too much of this. A long period of time. Too many takes.
How is it when you're doing more than one voice for a project too? Does that get a little crazy?
No, normally what happens is the director will say, well, you're doing a scene with yourself here. Do you want to try to do it all in one go, or would you like to do one voice at a time, and I'll read the other lines in for continuity, and you take your pick. Some, you know, if you're feeling lucky,
Yeah. Right.
you take a shot at doing both.
We have another clip. It says Shipwreck. I think, is that from G.I. Joe?
Yes.
Okay. That's from G.I. Joe. All right, let's check this one out as well.
Nice bike. Maybe we could borrow it? No, that's stealing. I'll ask for permission later.
Uh-oh. Looks like you're asking for trouble now.
Shipwreck.
How would you like it if someone took your bike?
I wouldn't.
And if you get caught?
I'd definitely end up in trouble.
Remember, taking something that isn't yours just isn't right.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
That's one of the famous public service announcements that we do.
Yeah.
And we used to laugh about them, but I tell you, we do these conventions,
Mm-hmm.
and people come up, guys mostly, and they will tell a heartbreaking story of a terrible childhood, and they will say, all I had was you guys. The only moral instruction I ever got was from those public service announcements.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I became a policeman. I joined the military. I did this. I did that. You know, I've had a good life, and you know, thank you.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
I mean, I'm close to tears sometimes when these guys.
Isn't it amazing? What
Yeah.
You never realize, even when being on the radio as an announcer, a DJ, a broadcaster, television host, newscaster, actor, performer, whatever it may be, you never realize sometimes until you hear from people the impact that you make on their lives, how they really are emotionally connected to you or to the character you're playing if you're acting it. And it's extraordinary. I'm sure you've had letters. I'm sure you've had all kinds of communication, or people have bumped into you in the supermarket over the years, whatever. I've had that through my broadcast career. And oh, we've been meaning to come up to you, and we were afraid to bother you. And I'm like, bother, say, you know what? It's nice to meet you. I'm happy to meet you. And they write letters and say different things over the years of how they just listen to what you're doing or watch you do this, and what it really means to them. And then that's just that's the icing on the cake for all the hard work, the years put in, the blood, sweat, and tears, the late hours, and all the 300 in Honolulu, but then moving up and up and up. When you hear the response from the viewer or the audience or the consumer of the material, right?
Sometimes, yes. It's it's funny. You're, as I said, I'm sort of an introvert. And radio gives you the chance to entertain and talk to potentially thousands of people, but you never hear or see them. And I used to know the singer Don Ho.
Oh, yeah, Tiny Bubbles.
Yeah, and in Hawaii. And he used to come up to the radio station all the time, and he was fascinated by the whole thing, and he was intrigued, and he wanted to do radio. And, of course, he was a phenomenal live entertainer. If you ever saw him live at Duke Kahanamoku's in Honolulu, he was absolutely brilliant the way he would handle an audience and make them laugh, make them cry, whatever. I mean, there's far more to him than Tiny Bubbles. But anyway, he finally did get on the radio, and it didn't go well. And after I talked to him, and he said, it's a whole different thing, when I'm in the club and I tell a joke, they laugh or they don't laugh. That's what I live for, but on radio, I tell a joke, silence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I said, well, Don, what you do is when you hit the punchline, you roll a record, and a loud one. And
right.
that's your laugh,
Let it sink in. Let it soak in. We have another one here from Shipwreck as well. Let's take a look at this one, and we can talk about this. I believe it's also from the G.I. Joe series as well.
I'm running away from home. My parents are mean. Where'll you go? I'm not sure, but I'll show them.
That's right. You'll show them how mean you can be.
Shipwreck!
Isn't it better to try to solve problems instead of running away from them?
I could try talking to my parents again.
Yeah, tell them how you feel. And remember, running away
leads nowhere. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle.
G.I.
Yeah, there's a great story about that voice. If you want to hear it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Shipwreck is one of the most popular characters I've done over the years. And so I called in to audition for this. And then there's a picture of a guy in a sailor suit and a little one-paragraph description. I don't even know what it said. So I start reading the audition, and I can tell that they're underwhelmed. And I was just about to say, well, that's all I got, fellas. Thanks. It's been nice. And there was a guy sitting in the corner, and he said, have you ever seen the movie The Last Detail? And thank goodness I had. The Last Detail is a movie that starred Jack Nicholson. It was relatively early on in his career, a lovely little Hal Ashby film about a ne'er-do-well sailor named Billy Badass Badusky. And he and another sailor are given the task of taking a younger sailor to the brig, where he's going to have to do 8 years. And they decide they're going to show this kid a good time before he goes in. The kid is played by Randy Quaid. But anyway, the minute he said, Jack actually was nominated for Best Actor. He didn't win, but he was nominated. But people have forgotten about The Last Detail because almost a year later, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out, and Chinatown came out, and Nicholson's career went to the moon, and people sort of forgot about The Last Detail. But I had seen it. In particular, one scene which takes place in a bar where the bartender threatens to call the shore patrol, and because of the detail they're on, they've been assigned 45 caliber semi-automatic weapons. So Jack pulls his giant gun out of his holsters. You want the Shore Patrol? We are the mother bleeping Shore Patrol. Slams the gun on the bar. I get some beer up here, you know. And I said, I know exactly what they want. And I had been doing this voice that people told me sort of sounded Nicholson-esque, at least the young Jack. He sounds nothing like that today. And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And the guy in the corner said, you got it,
Yeah.
which is usually the kiss of death. But in this case, I got it. And
You got it.
one of the most rewarding characters of any that I've had the chance to play. Much beloved.
Yeah. We mentioned the work, of course, doing work for Nova on PBS, which is amazing. Also, here is another shot from Spider-Man, Norman, really cool one, and the Green Goblin as well. People may remember. And then also Transformers, Springer. How'd that happen too? How'd you get involved with that one, with Transformers? These are all, I mean, people know all of these and love these.
Well, Transformers and G.I. Joe were produced by the same company, and they were recorded and voice directed by the same guy, a guy named Wally Burr. And so I was already working on G.I. Joe, and my agent said, you know, Wally's got another show called Transformers. And I said, no, I don't know anything about that. He said, well, you want to read for it? And I said, of course, you know, read for anything. And I went down and I initially bagged the characters of Hook, Slag, and Bone Crusher. I don't know who comes up with these names. And then later I got the character of Springer. That came towards the end of the series, just in time for the movie.
Yeah.
Which came out in '86.
Absolutely. Also, Keith and Voltron. How'd that happen?
Yes.
Yeah, another one.
That was, Keith and Pidge and Voltron. Well, that was the first big show I got into. I had been bouncing around doing guest shots on various shows. I'd even been a regular on a couple of smaller shows. But this thing was giant. They were going to do 125 episodes, and they did. And it was so early on in my career, and suddenly I had the lead role in this 125 episode show, and I was just over the moon. So I'm very fond of Keith. I used my Tommy teenage voice for him. I can still sort of do it.
Yeah.
Okay, team, let's form Voltron.
It's perfect.
I was even sort to do Pidge, but it's a stretch these days.
How about Springer? You have a little Springer in you?
Yes, well, Springer's, it's just a hyper masculine voice. And he basically, you know, his one big line in the movie that everybody loved was, "I've got better things to do tonight than die." And then he thrusts a giant rocket into a thing and fires it. And when that played in the theater, the audience went nuts, jumping up and down and screaming and yelling. And I thought, I may be on to something here. And people frequently request that I do that line for them at conventions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody's loving it. Great voices. So cool. Voltron. What an exciting career you have. G.I. Joe, our hero. Very cool. My son used to love to watch G.I. Joe. Of course, they're grown now.
Oh, yeah.
that does happen.
Our fan base is, I think, they're all in their late 40s at this point.
My husband is happy now. He loved G.I. Joe. Cool, awesome, really good comments coming in. Marsha Murphy Watson asks, did you know the Beamer brothers in Hawaii?
No, I did not. I know who she means, but no, I did not know them.
We have another great...
I did know, well,
yeah,
it might mean something to her. I did know Kui Lee briefly. He was a very talented guy who worked with Don Ho. And sadly was taken by cancer at a very young age, 31, 32. Had he not died, I think he would have had a huge career. Very talented guy.
You were also in American Tail. Tell us about that too.
Oh, that was a lovely...
Honest John.
That was a lovely job. It all will sound so quaint now. My agent called and she said, Don Bluth is doing this feature film. Steven Spielberg is producing. Would you like to read for the character of Honest John? He's a mouse, but he's like a sort of drunken, corrupt Tammany Hall politician. They want an Irish accent. And I said, sure, I'll take a whack at it. Send me some copy. And she said, well, there is no copy. And I got up on my high horse and said, well, if they can't be bothered to send me copy, I can be bothered to read for their silly little project. And then I came to my senses. I had this little makeshift studio. This was all on reel-to-reel tape. This is how long ago that was. And so I wrote some nonsensical political speech.
And I sat down in front of the microphone and I did it as though I would had a couple of drinks, and I, rewound the tape and I put it in an envelope, you see, and I went down to the post office and I mailed it to Steven Spielberg. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, they said, you got it. Come on in and do it. And I had a lovely scene with Madeline Kahn. I was a huge fan of hers. Never met her. Unfortunately, they worked everything separately. And Don Bluth read her lines. And
That's
but this was American. This movie, American Tail, was what really kicked off the Renaissance in animation. Because it had really been sort of a fallow period. Disney wasn't doing much, and nobody was doing anything. The only people who would do a movie, once in a while, Hanna-Barbera would do a cheap knockoff of one of their television shows, and it would run in theaters like only on Saturday mornings or something,
right,
for the kiddies.
Right.
And this thing came along, and it actually ended up grossing over $50 million, which doesn't sound like much today, but this was 83, 84?
Yeah.
Suddenly it was like, whoa, there's an audience for this stuff. And suddenly Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then Pixar, and on and on and on. But arguably, that whole thing was kicked off by the success of An American Tail. And it was one of the last times us plane rap actors got a chance to be in one of these. Very quickly, the celebs came in and swooped up everything. And we're reading for third guard from the left who says, oof, twice.
That's right. And then Back to the Future 2 as well, the movie. Tell us about how you got involved in that.
Yeah, I wish I had a wonderful story. I should probably make one up. But I don't even remember if I auditioned for this. I think I may not have. They may have just requested me. I was told, go to Universal Studios and do this job. And I went, and it was actually done in the basement of the Alfred Hitchcock Theater. They have a theater on the movie lot where they show, their new movies. And in the basement, there's a whole sound setup. So down there I go, and I'm handed the copy for the voice of the Biff Tannen Museum. And again, Mr. Spielberg was not there. There were 2 or 3 folks, I don't recall who they were. But I did 2 or 3 takes, and they said, that's absolutely fine. We got what we need. And I said, okay, well, thanks a million. I'll see you.
Yeah.
And I wish there was more to the story than that. But of course, now I get people coming up to me at conventions saying, you're part of the trilogy. Well, okay, a very small part, but thank you. And yeah, that's probably the most prominent. I mean, I've done radio and television announcers and all kinds of stuff in movies, but that's the most prominent. That's the most prominent one. I mentioned the Biff Tannen Museum. People know what I'm talking about.
Do you have a little of that sound?
What? Biff Tannen, a great American, a wonderful man who, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Dick Tracy too.
Yeah. That was, I again called from the agent. Can you do Walter Winchell? And I said, yeah, sure. And I do sort of a lousy Walter Winchell, but what the hell? And they said, all right, well, Warren Beatty's making this movie, and he wants to cast old time news types, 1930s type news people. And she said, by the way, it's on camera. And if you get it, you'll have to shave your beard. And I said, well, it's pointless, Donna. I don't look anything like Walter Winchell. And she said, just go, just go, just go. So I went to the place and they videotaped me. And to my amazement, there were 4 newsmen in the movie. I was the green newsman, which is ironic. I never wear green for some reason. I just but I actually got to go to Western costume when it was still in Hollywood and have a fitting. And it's like being in the movies. And I've got this green suit with the green hat. And I did a whole day on the movie and I was there for, I think, 12 hours. And I'm visible for, I would say, about a second and a half.
But what a second and a half it was, right?
Yeah, that's that is the extent of my on-camera career. If I'm going to put a reel together, I would just have to loop that second and a half for about 20 minutes. Well, this is it. That's all I got. But
yeah.
But I'm also heard in the movie. They sprinkled in some of the voice stuff, but it was fun. I mean,
yeah. It's an experience, absolutely.
Sitting there with that bank of lights and that giant camera and the voices. The funny thing is, I never wear a hat, and this costume came with a hat.
Came with the hat,
and I don't wear a hat because it's something about my face. I just look like a dork if I put a hat on, any kind of hat. So I just never wear one unless I'm absolutely forced to. So I'm sitting there ready to do my scene, and I have forgotten the hat. I left it sitting on a table somewhere over in the corner. And Warren Beatty says, "Where's the hat?" And I said, "Oh, I left it." And stay where you are. Someone will get it. I mean, so out of the gloom, these 2 hands come with a hat. They put it on my head, and there's about a 3-beat pause, and Beatty says, "Lose the hat."
Doesn't work.
He realized I look like a dork in a hat too. So I'm the only news person in the movie who does not have a hat on.
Doesn't have that fedora. And then you had involvement with the show about nothing, Seinfeld. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, again, a call from the agent. And I should explain something about voiceovers, which I think is still true today. Not necessarily with the promo people. They probably do have to work on weekends. But every other phase of the business, weekends are sacrosanct. Nobody works or auditions on the weekend. Monday to Friday, they can tear your life apart. But Saturday and Sunday are yours. She said, how'd you like to do an audition on Saturday? And if you get it, you'll work on Sunday. And I said, not much. I don't believe I'd care to participate in something that silly. Thank you very much. Well, it's for Seinfeld. Oh,
let's see.
All right, I'll show up.
I'll skip mowing the lawn this weekend.
And I went in with a guy that I had worked with in the past. We were really pretty good at sounding like, they wanted sports announcers, and he and I were pretty good at sounding like a team of sports announcers. I was sort of the snappy play-by-play guy, and he was the color man. And we booked a lot of radio commercials doing that. So they sent us in as a team, and they split us up. There were 2 other guys. I went in with some guy I didn't even know. But there was Jerry himself sitting behind the desk. And I thought, wow, he comes in on a Saturday to cast a voiceover. He's either really committed or he has no life, but that's his business. And amazingly enough, they cast both me and my buddy, even though we didn't read together. They somehow figured out that we worked well together. And so I don't know how many we did, 6 or 8 shows total, I think, just sports announcers, that kind of thing. And it was a lot of fun. It was nice. It was nice to get involved in a show.
Have you seen the reruns where all of a sudden it pops on, or people say, "Hey, I just heard your voice on the rerun of Seinfeld"?
Well, not to be crass, but the checks keep showing up, so I know they're running somewhere.
So I think Lucille Ball once said, when Bob Hope was talking to her on one of the Salute shows or something, he said, faces everywhere around the world, Lucy. And I Love Lucy is playing always somewhere in some city. I think they're even playing up there in heaven. And she looks up, she goes, well, if they are, they're not paying for them.
Yeah. That was probably the first thing she said to the big guy when she got up there.
About the residuals.
Where's those residuals? And then a whole other beast, which is video games. Video games. Tell us about that and how that may differ, or, just how it works.
Well, the first video game I ever did was around 1990. It was something called Stunt Island, and the director said, "You're going to do 9 lines." And the reason it's only 9 lines is that's all we have room for. And the game was on floppy disks, if anybody remembers those. And I did my 9 lines, and I walked out thinking, I don't see much of a future in this, which shows how much I know. And of course, the whole thing has exploded exponentially when I did Mass Effect. I mean, I did reams of stuff. I was the codex narrator.
Mass Effect.
And I did hours and hours of stuff. And meanwhile, the game, I gather, they had a poster up in the lobby where they recorded it, and all the actors signed it. And there must be 100 voices on that thing at least.
Mm-hmm.
And from 9 lines, that's all we have room for. And and it's just exploded exponentially. It is somewhat difficult to do, at least it has been for me. Now, other actors may have other experiences. Maybe I haven't been involved in shows where they do it this way, but whenever I do it, I work alone. And a lot of the lines, there's no storyline because it's a game. And a lot of the time I'm talking to the player, who obviously isn't there, doesn't even know the game exists yet. And so you have to you're reading these lines, trying to imagine the motivation for the line because you don't have a plot or a story to help you. And sometimes the director doesn't even know. It's like, why am I saying this? Well, I don't really know. Do your best. And it's a little bit of a different animal. As I say, when you do animation, you're working with other actors, you're bouncing off them. It's actors working together. When it goes well, it's like a great tennis volley.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine trying to play tennis with nobody on the other side of the net.
Right.
Tough.
It's all you. So you mentioned Mass Effect. For folks that are familiar with Mass Effect, what were some of the roles you had in Mass Effect?
I was just the codex narrator.
The codex narrator.
Yeah, that's all I did in Mass Effect. But I've never done motion capture, which is this is an interesting thing. A lot of the time, you're not only voicing something, you're also putting one of these suits with dots on it, and you're actually playing the part. And I did one, Rage 2.
Well, I'm Dr. Kvasir, the scientist, and I didn't do motion capture, but I did facial capture. So this young lady comes with a pen and puts dots all over my face. I still have a picture of that. And it looked like I had a terrible disease.
And so something in Rage 2, that's me acting, I guess, sort of.
Yeah.
With dots on my face.
So I mentioned Mass Effect, and then also Metal Gear Solid. That's about that.
Yeah, I'm. Let's see. I'm Colonel Vol'jin in that one, and Colonel Vol'jin is actually my attempt to imitate Don LaFontaine. And it didn't go very well, as you can tell. But actually, as I mentioned in my book, which I'm going to plug shamelessly here in a minute, a lot of the characters I've done. There it is. Yeah.
Vocal recall.
Yeah.
Life and radio and voiceovers.
Yeah. A lot of the voices, or quite a few of the voices I've done, were actually failed impressions, which isn't isn't a bad thing necessarily. You know, some people who are trying to break in the business don't quite understand how it works, and they send in demos of them doing imitations of celebrities.
Yeah.
Well, there's not much of a future in that.
No.
I mean, if they imitate a celebrity, they're liable to get sued. What they're looking for are original, different, interesting voices. You know, you're creating a show like The Simpsons. You've got a character like Bart. What's Bart going to sound like? Could be anything. And in comes Nancy Cartwright, and there's Bart Simpson. And she's the one who came up with that voice. Not any producer, not any writer. She's the one. And that's the creative thing. You know, an exercise that I suggest to people who are trying to break into animation is pick a show that you like and tape it. That shows how old I am. And,
we all still say that. Yeah. Tape it.
And then write up the lines that a character says, and then pretend that you show up at an audition and they go, you know what, you know that character in that show, we're going to change it. We're going to fire that actor. We want a completely different voice. What do you got?
Yeah.
Try to revoice a favorite character of yours. Think, what would you have done if you'd shown up in that audition? How would you have approached that? It's a wonderful exercise, I think. And that's, so when you attempt to do an impression and it fails, maybe you come up with something that's actually kind of different and interesting.
Right.
And it becomes a character. And
did you look up to people like the Mel Blancs and all of them?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. One of my regrets is that I never met or worked with Mel Blanc. He was around when I got started, but he was in a terrible automobile accident, which he never completely recovered. And so he recorded, I think his son put a studio together for him, and he would record in that studio so he didn't have to travel anywhere. And so I never got to meet him. But no, absolutely. And the wonderful June Foray, who was Rocky the Flying Squirrel, and Natasha, and a million things. And I did get to meet and work with her on numerous occasions, and that was a real treat. And in fact, I remember once I was in the green room and I suddenly realized that she was there and Bill Scott was there. And I said, I'm looking at Rocky and Bullwinkle. I'll be damned. And they're having a nice little chat about who knows what. But
how was your George Burns?
And
I never tried to do George Burns.
Good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
I can't know.
You also, going back to the video games, Neil, had involvement in Call of Duty as well. Tell us about that. That's well known, obviously.
Yeah, what did I do on Call of Duty? I think I was just various incredibly macho fighting men, but I don't have a specific memory on that one. I'm sorry, that's too far back in
a couple of years.
You know, one of the things that I have to confess,
Doom 3 also.
Yeah, that I do remember. I was Sarge in that one, and but one of the things that I confess in my book is I have a chapter on games, but it's the shortest chapter in the book because I don't remember a lot. Most of the time when I work on these things, it's 1 4-hour session and I'm done. I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And it's trying to recall a 4-hour period from 15 years ago is difficult unless something really interesting happens.
I was just about to say, so then you have an ability not to necessarily get totally attached or emotionally wrapped up in the character at the time. You can move on and do the next and next for the variety of it all.
Sure. Well, again, as I said about games, there's no storyline.
No.
You're reading isolated lines.
Yeah, right.
And so there's really, if I talk about playing Shipwreck on G.I. Joe, well, I was in, I think, 60 episodes.
Right.
And that's I can talk about that. But you go in and do one of these games, it's 4 hours. Thank you. Sign the form. Goodbye.
That's it.
And
right.
2 weeks later, they remember when you did that? I did. You don't even remember you did it. It's
right.
So I don't have any kind of good game stories to tell, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish I did.
But still a hero to many, just having been involved in them, I would imagine. Absolutely. And then, of course, in some of the announcing side of things, involvement with the Emmys as well as the Oscars. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Oscars, it was interesting. 2003, and again, a call from the agent. They are auditioning to be the announcer for the Oscars. Are you interested? Oh, I suppose.
Yeah. I was going to go grocery shopping tonight, but
It's either that or rearrange the sock drawer. Oh, what?
Right.
I'll jump. So I did an initial audition without any hope in hell of getting the part, and then they called and they said, "Well, you made the finals," and I showed up, and that was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Because the guy who was going to direct it was there, and he said, there's more to this than just announcing it, because you got headphones on and you're going to be hearing a lot of chatter in the trailer, and you've got to be able to concentrate on what you're reading, even with this chatter going on in the headphones. So he did this wonderful job of recreating the thing. I would be reading the 75th Annual Academy Awards, and he'd be in the headphones going, "Camera 3, give me a shot of this. Camera 2, go over here." And I managed to stumble through that in some shape or fashion. And then there was an amazing coincidence. He suddenly, the guy I'm talking about is the director, Lou Horvitz. He suddenly referenced the fact that he had heard me on radio years ago. And he said, "Well, you'll be good with this if you get it, because you have a live radio background. Most voiceover people have never been live." And I thought he's right. Voiceovers, most people, you breeze into the studio and with any luck, you nail it on take 7 or 9. Well, this stuff, there's only take 1 for 3.5 hours. And if you've never been live, that's kind of daunting. But of course, disc jockey work, it's always live. And so anyway, to my amazement, they said, "You're the guy." And I was not the only announcer that year. There were 2 announcers. There was Randy Thomas, who's a wonderful announcer live. Well, she does a ton of stuff, but she's
incredible now. Yeah. Very
wonderful
busy.
live event announcer. She's done the Oscars, I don't know how many times, and Tonys, and you name it. But and she's really the one that got me through this. I don't know how I would have gotten through it without her. But anyway, yeah, in 2003, I did the Oscars, and that's probably the most pressure I've ever felt in my life.
Was the Oscars? How about the Emmys?
Well, the Emmys, a lot of pressure too. Same thing, slightly less, because I'd done the Oscars, and so now I sort of knew what to expect. But I mean, you're sitting there, and in the case of the Oscars, this telecast is going worldwide.
Yeah.
And sitting in the auditorium is the cream of Hollywood. All these famous faces sitting there, and you're walking this tightrope, hoping you don't screw anything up. And thank goodness we didn't. That night, and very grateful for that.
Those are wonderful opportunities to have had, and absolutely, the book itself. Quite amazing. As a matter of fact, there was a comment that came in from Pete White, who said, "I love the book. I listened on my road trip to Voltron 2020 and really enjoyed it." He's watching on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. Good to see you, Pete. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really
like
that.
Good words. Appreciate it.
The inspiration to put all this pen to paper and to put all this down. Tell us about that. What inspired you to want to write the book, Vocal Recall, A Life in Radio and Voiceovers, Neil?
Well, there's a wonderful voice actor who does his own podcast. And he invited me to be on with him at the Improv in Hollywood. And I did a live appearance there. I was terrified. I mean, this is a renowned comedy club, and I am not a stand-up. But this went remarkably well. I had a wonderful time, and I thought, gosh, maybe I could write a monologue and book myself in places. I'd do the monologue, and then I'd take questions from the audience, and it would be really fun. And I was spacing the name of the guy who took me to the Improv. It was Rob Paulson, who's a wonderful actor, probably best known for Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. And I'm very grateful to him. Anyway, I started writing this monologue. And at a certain point, I realized this is not a monologue anymore. I mean, it's just way too long for a monologue. And I was terrified of saying to myself that I was writing a book. So I played a game in my mind. I said, I'm not writing a book. I'm writing this chapter. Maybe that's all I'll ever write. But I'm going to write this chapter. And I would write that chapter. Then I would start thinking about another chapter. And I'd think about it for a week or 10 days. And when it suddenly hit critical mass, I'd dive for the keyboard and I'd write that chapter. But that's all I'm writing. Not writing a book, just writing this chapter. And I played that game with myself up to about chapter 35. And then I had to break down and, well, this is going to be a book, I guess. And I don't know. It seemed like the time, I'm sort of in the twilight of my career. You can cue violins now if you want. Maybe this is the time to sum it all up.
So what do you hope people get out of the book? Is it for those that are industry based, or is it for really anybody? How do you interpret, what you hope people are left with upon reading Vocal Recall?
I hope it's for anybody. If you find at all the life of an itinerant radio DJ or a not so itinerant voiceover person intriguing, you might enjoy it. Obviously, if you have ambitions to be in voiceovers, you might learn something certainly about the history of the craft, because it's gone through all kinds of incredible changes, most of which I chronicle. Or people interested in radio. I don't know if anybody is anymore, unfortunately, but so yeah. If you think it might be interesting, who knows? And if all else fails, look at this. I mean, is this a great doorstop or what? I mean, where else are you going to get a doorstop like this for a mere $19.95? Come on.
I think the only other one that rivals that is Moby Dick.
Exactly.
Possibly the Bible. I mean, I think the Bible's thinner.
Yeah. Well, I had more to say than God did, apparently.
That's right.
God had a better editor than I did.
Yeah. Speaking of that, and you and I talked about this before live on the air, and I've been hired by production companies who are doing the production for usually in New York and Manhattan for corporations, and you're sort of the good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're that voice of God announcer at their corporate event and things of that nature. Have you done a lot of that work too? Voice of God work, corporate events, industrial work, those things as well along the way?
Yeah, I did most of that, as I indicated early on in my career. Not a lot of that, to be honest with you. Once in a while, something like that comes along. It's funny. The latest thing that I'm doing, and I'd never done this before, despite having been in the business. I don't even want to say how long. Is I'm an announcer on a game show now.
Oh, you are.
I'm the announcer on Press Your Luck, which is a summer
revamp.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a summer replacement show.
Sure.
I'm the announcer, and I'm also the voice of the whammy. And although,
well, I go up as high as I can go, and then they take it and they tweak it and make it even higher.
but yeah, and I had never done a game show. I never even tried to do a game show because I heard the announcer also has to warm up the audience.
Yes.
And being an introvert, I thought this is not the job for me, because I've worked on sitcoms, and I've watched the warm up people, and it's such a thankless job. I thought, that's not for me. But as it turns out, in this instance, they don't need me to warm up the audience. So perfect. And
that's really cool. That is,
yeah.
I didn't realize that, Park. I'm going to look for that. That's cool. That's great.
I think we're off the air for this year. And whether we'll come back or not, I don't know under the current circumstances. I guess they're trying to do game shows without audiences, and
Yeah, yeah, and
So
talk
we'll,
shows without
yeah.
audiences.
So
And
we'll see if it comes back. I sure hope.
where do they shoot that? What studios?
We did it at Television City
Hmm.
in Hollywood.
Television City in Hollywood.
Yes.
The big CBS building there.
Yeah.
Pete White again says, definitely a book that is entertaining for all, especially for me because I have fond memories of the characters Neil brought to life. And then Renee Katz in New York says it will be used in schools, thinking that it might be something that's a great reference in schools. And also she said something a little bit earlier, which I think is probably, I don't know if this is something you've done or would consider. I'm sure you're a wonderful teacher, teaching others, consulting, coaching.
You know, I've never felt the calling to do that. And I don't know why. It isn't because I'm, selfish and I don't want to share. It's just I don't know that I have anything much to say or to teach. The way I learned whatever it is I've learned is you just try stuff. And most of the time they're screaming, no, 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 don't do that. But once in a while they say, oh, that's good. Keep doing that. And so you make a mental note. Oh, that's good. I'll keep doing that. And eventually you winnow away all the bad stuff, or as much as you can, and you're left with the good stuff. And that's how I got where I am. And I tried every kind of technique. I mean, I would hang from the ceiling like a bat if they told me to, try everything and see what works for you and what doesn't. And I don't know how to turn that into a class. It's just something you got to go do. And so, no, I'm not a teacher. I'm sorry.
Probably are in ways that you might not even realize. Sometimes it's there, but you don't realize that you're actually doing it. And just in some of the commentary and the advice, and even through the book itself, Christopher in Ohio asks, he says, Neil, you have an exceptional voice, which I concur. Have you ever done any singing with that voice?
I actually did sing in a Don Bluth movie. Was it The Troll in Central Park or, geez, I forget. But they they brought three of us in, and I had no idea they wanted to. I find out we're going to be singing, and which is something I never tried to do. And not only are we singing, we're being directed by Barry Manilow.
Okay, all right.
And somehow I got through it, and he didn't say, "You, the guy in the middle, stop singing." He seemed okay with what we did, but it's no, I've never tried to sing.
Renee Katz says you have been teaching tonight.
Well,
yeah.
I hope it was good. I don't know.
Karen says great radio voice indeed. Christopher says way cool. Karen says many people are teachers but don't realize they're actually teaching others. Bernadette says Neil seems so humble and doesn't realize his reach. I'm sure he'd be a wonderful teacher. So yeah, you've got a little bit of a crowd here.
Thank you. Those are lovely sentiments, and I'll give it a serious consideration.
What is a typical day like for you now? Obviously, this year is a little bit crazy, but do you have a certain set routine that you do, and you'll get solicited maybe for work, and you'll take a look at that, and then you'll do some recording this time of the day, and then you'll follow up with calls? Or what's a typical day for you in the world of voiceover for people who are watching who don't know how that all works?
Well, of course, with the pandemic, it's nothing like it was. I have a home studio. Some producers are willing to work with those. Some people want you there in person.
Do you have a preference? Did you like going there and having the cup of coffee and sitting and talking with, or do you like the home studio more? Some have a preference, one or the other. Some don't care.
I actually enjoy going places.
Me too.
The only problem is that the damn traffic in Los Angeles is just was so awful. And sometimes they've got you ping-ponging between Burbank and Santa Monica. And I know if you're not from the LA area.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what that means, but
That could take forever.
once I get there, I love it. You know, you bump into other people and you talk and you have the coffee, like you said. And also, I don't have to worry about the technical thing.
Right.
Engineers, you know, that's their job, and they're damn good at it. By the way.
Yes.
I love the engineers in this city, always have. But I don't have to worry. Whereas in my home studio, in addition to performing, I'm also, is this thing running? Am I overmodulating? Did I click the wrong thing? Because I'm not terribly good at this stuff, I'm afraid.
You have to email it and send it out and then hear back. And
yeah, I equate it to, not to put on airs, but it's like an actor playing Hamlet, and he also has to run the lighting and the sound system
which
while he's doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if it weren't for the damn traffic, I'd much prefer to go to a nice studio, sip my coffee, and let the engineers worry about all those squiggly lines.
Did you ever have, I'm sure you have, where there was a couple where I did some narration stuff. Obviously, it was on camera. There were radio commercials that were to be voiced, so I did those. And then there was on camera, and I had to be a doctor. It was for a pain management center up in Massachusetts. And at first, and the owner or the director of the center wasn't sure what he wanted. First, he wanted a female, and then he wanted a certain sound, and then a certain look, and then it changed about 55 different times. And the production company, which I think the production company they used was an NBC affiliates production department, they to them it was great because, you know, every time he changed, you know, his idea before they even finalized anything, you know, the clock was the meter was running because they were filming it all and they were recording it all. And then finally they said, okay, we want a guy, we want this look, and they ended up going with me, which was terrific. It was a great campaign. Have you had that happen where sometimes either the owner of the car lot is sitting there and, you know, I think I want to be in this spot with you, or let's change this, or let's change that, or right there on the spot?
We're usually shielded from that. Once in a while, you know, the actual advertiser will show up, and I always think, oh, now we can't have any fun, you know, because when they're there, you got to be very serious. And oh yes, it's like the old joke of there's a scientist, he's got a test tube, and he says, I've got it. And he's running and he trips and it goes down the drain, and he says, oh no, that was the cure for cancer. I had it, now it's gone. And the other scientist says, relax, this is just cancer. It's not like we're doing advertising. Yeah, no, most of the time I'm just dealing with people from the ad agency and that sort of thing. And
what about the radio part? Do you miss the live radio? Do you miss anything about that? Doing that, just the live. I'm like you. I've always loved live television, live radio, just the energy, the adrenaline, the anything can happen, and you have to sew it together, and they're all counting on you pulling it together to make it sound smooth and coherent and like everything was supposed to happen as it's happening. There's just something. That's why I like to do this whole series every night live. We could pre-record it like a lot of people do. I'm a live kind of person and feed off the energy of live. Do you miss live? Do you love live? Tell us about that.
I don't miss disc jockeying. It's funny. As I mentioned, I think I got into the disc jockey business because I'm somewhat of an introverted extrovert. I like to perform.
Right.
But I don't like people watching me do it.
Right.
But, you know, time passed. I kind of began to come out of my shell. I got into voiceovers, and there was a period of time where the voiceover career overlapped with the disc jockey career. And
Yes.
so I would be up in Cahuenga Pass at Hanna-Barbera working with 5 or 6 really funny, incredibly talented people, and the lines would be zinging back and forth, and we'd have a ball, and I'd get in the car and I'd drive down to Sunset Boulevard and go in the radio station, and I'm all alone in this room talking to myself. And suddenly I didn't want to be there anymore. It was like punishment. It was like, oh, they sent me to my room.
Mm,
Even the simplest commercial session, it's you, an engineer, and a producer.
right.
You're never alone. And suddenly I didn't want to be in that room anymore. I didn't want to just sit there waiting for Elton John to finish singing so I could say something clever like, well, it's 7:15 on a bitchin' Monday evening, gang. It's fine. It's like I
But
felt
after a while, it becomes very rote, very sort of mechanical in a way.
So in 85, I said, it's been fun, but I got to run. And
Yeah.
away I went. And would I want to go back to that? Back to that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really don't.
You've carved out a nice niche in what you do and an expert at and specialize in. And it's an incredible career.
I love the adrenaline of the live or quasi-live stuff, like Press Your Luck. I mean, it's pre-recorded. If I screw up,
But it has that energy.
But I don't want to screw up. I want to be
Right.
I don't want to be a problem. I want to be the guy that delivers every time. Or some of these live events like the Emmys, the Oscars, or the American Film Institute Life Achievement Award Telecast. I did that for 7 years. Again, it's pre-taped, but everybody's there. You want to get it right, and thank goodness I did for 7 years. And so I enjoy those kinds of lives. But back into radio, no. Not that they would have me, believe me.
Is there anything within the industry that you wish you had done, passed up on, or would still like to do?
Well, I find myself thinking about on camera, but I don't think they're looking for any year-old beginners. And, all in all, I think I was where I needed to be for most of my life. And that's one of the things that I say in the book and that I say to people at conventions. I am one of those, and it's sad how few of us there are, but one of those lucky people who got paid to do something he loved doing. And that is such a gift, because so many people trudge to these jobs that mean nothing. It's just a paycheck, and they live for the weekends. And I couldn't do that. But for most of my adult life, I have made a living doing what I loved. And I'm so grateful for that. It's been such a privilege.
Absolutely. How about audiobooks? Have you done audiobooks as well?
Only one, my own.
Yeah.
And
So it's out as an audiobook too. Yeah.
And that's work. I don't know that I'd want to do that again. I mean, I almost fired myself 3 times.
You've had enough of yourself?
My hat's off to people that do audiobooks. That's a lot of work.
It
a lot
really
of concentration.
is. Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'd want to do that again.
Be patient, a lot of hours. Christopher Joseph, who's a fan of the legendary WJR in Detroit, says you would be great on WJR Detroit. He wants you on WJR in Detroit.
Well, okay. I did get offered a job at WXYZ in Detroit, but by then my voiceover career was beginning to blossom, and I regretfully declined that position.
What would you say to somebody watching live now, Neil, or somebody who will watch this on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, in the archives, who is considering now to go into the field of radio? Has changed. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to get into now, because so many stations are just operating like satellite stations. Sometimes the people aren't necessarily even there, depending on the market, the size of the station, as we know. I mean, you could always tell sort of like an insider secret that we both know, that whenever you hear somebody saying the time, you'll know that it's pre-recorded when they say it's 9 after the hour. Could be any hour, but 9 after the hour. So things are so automated now. But somebody wanting to go in perhaps into voiceover, what would you say, as somebody who's been doing this so brilliantly for such a long time? What advice or suggestion would you have? Should they stay an accountant if they want to be an accountant, or should they go into this?
Well, I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody get into radio at this point. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 effectively destroyed a wonderful business. Thank you so much, Congress. And it's nothing I would recommend to anybody at this point. I tell people, there's still towers and call letters, but essentially the business I was in doesn't exist anymore. Voiceovers, that's a different thing. But it's never been easy. As I mentioned in my book, when I started out, it was a complete 180-degree thing from where it is now. Essentially, you had a relatively small group of performers, mostly in LA and New York. The buyers loved them and used them over and over and over again. They were the pros from Dover. And in order to break in, you had to hope that somebody got sick or didn't show up, and they gave you a shot, and you just kind of had to wait your turn. It was very difficult. Now everybody and his uncle wants to be in voiceovers. And of course, the celebrities have come in and taken a huge chunk of the business. And it's when I was starting out in Los Angeles around 1980, a guy who ran a voice casting company called The Voicecaster, they're still around. He estimated there were, a few hundred people doing voiceovers full time in Los Angeles at that point. The last time I talked to a lady who runs a voice casting place, she told me she has on her computer this list of what she calls the A talents, the top people. And I said, may I ask how many people are on that list? She said about 30,000. Now, she said that includes specialty people like someone who can speak Finnish. But she said, 30,000. The odds are just astronomical at this point. Yeah. But, if I mentioned in my book that I didn't choose radio and I didn't choose voiceovers. They chose me. I mentioned a writer named Charles Bukowski. That's where I got the idea. He's lecturing at a college, and a kid asked him, is writing a good career to choose? And Bukowski said, kid, you don't choose writing. Writing chooses you. He sat in a little hovel apartment in Hollywood typing these stories that wouldn't sell, working at the post office, a job he hated. But every night he would write. He had a compulsion to write. It chose him. I had a compulsion to be on the radio. I had a compulsion to do voiceovers. It chose me. If voiceovers has truly chosen you, then give it all you've got. Do anything and everything that involves performing. Little theater, if you're in a small town, get in a theater group. Do plays. If you can get into a radio station and work there. Any kind of thing that involves your use of the voice. And of course, they cannot hire you, but the one thing they can't do is prevent you from practicing. Find copy. There's good copy in magazines. Magazine advertisements are almost the same as voiceover advertisements. And or you can record a commercial break off of network television and write up the commercials and practice. You can get these little inexpensive recorders so that you can listen to yourself and play it back. If it's feasible, get into a workshop, take classes, just anything and everything. And just it's patience, persistence, and practice. And if things, break your way, you probably can do quite well. But There's a line in the Bible that a friend of mine repurposed. He said, there's a line in the Bible about show business. I said, there is? He said, yes, it's many are called, but few are chosen.
That is so perfect.
Unfortunately, there's thousands of people who want to get in, and only a relative handful will.
And tastes change, and everything changes.
Sure.
Rapidly too. You could have carved out a certain niche, and now all of a sudden, that's no longer in vogue. Now it's a whole new thing, and you either have to get retrained and adapt, or just be used when they need that particular niche you've carved out. And that happens a lot too.
It's a constant process of reinvention of yourself. You have to, hopefully have a good agent, and you kind of need to talk to that agent and say, listen, if I'm starting to sound a little retro, let me know. What do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do to freshen up my act? Right. And if your agent is good, they'll be able to give you the answer to that. And you cannot rest on your laurels in this business, because nobody is irreplaceable. Nobody. Don LaFontaine passed away, but trailers still get made. Promos still get recorded. Great as he was, they didn't miss a beat. They just kept going. And that's
right. Kind of like the infomercial actor Billy Mays, who used to do all those commercials. Take a look at this mop, and we did it. And same thing. They still make them. They still do them. They still, I think they found somebody that's similar to him, but not him. Still continues, moves forward.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. Well, this was great. This was, you know what, you've been teaching. What you just said for the last 5 minutes is teaching. You've been guiding and teaching and mentoring, whether you think so or not. Everybody's saying he's teaching.
Okay. Well, where do they send the checks?
Yeah. Where are those checks, folks? Show me the money first. They seem like such great advice and great ideas for breaking into the business. Teacher. 30,000. She's still stuck on the 30,000 top A-list. That is extraordinary. You're right. Everybody and their uncle thinks that,
Well, it seems simple. What's tough about getting in front of a mic and reading something off a piece of paper until you actually try to do it? And, so sometimes people will say, Thanksgiving dinner, I'm the life of the party. I crack my whole family up. I do all these voices and characters, and, they love me. And should I get into show business? And you say, well, maybe, but I assure you, young man or woman, there's a hell of a difference between Thanksgiving dinner with Aunt Maud, who loves you, and showing up at 9 a.m. in Burbank, facing a room full of people who don't really want to be there, who look at you and go, okay, what do you got? It's suddenly you're not the life of the party anymore.
No, and then you're calling out for Aunt Maud.
Or just being in a studio and looking through the window and there's all these faces and people go,
let's try that again. Could you be tall and short at the same, and funny and sad all at once? Let's try that. But do you like that, Harvey?
I don't know why we cast this guy in the first place.
Well, just try it again, honey.
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing probably with anything in life. Everybody thinks if they're singing in the shower that they're a singer, or if they're acting in high school, they're an actor. And the same thing with hosts, like what I do now. Anybody who has a cell phone, all of a sudden they're, I've been doing this for a long time, but anybody's a host now. It's the same type of thing.
If you think about some of it, was it American Idol? I think that was one of the shows where they show the early auditions where they come in and there's not even any, they sing a cappella. And they either make it up to the next level or they're thrown out. And some of these people show up and you think, God almighty, don't they own mirrors or tape recorders? Do they not? Do they honestly think they're ever going to get on this show?
Mirrors or tape recorders.
Delusional. It's Everybody thinks they can do voiceovers, and some of them can, but
right.
it's harder than it looks, folks.
Well, what was the guy they found, the homeless guy in California that was on the side of the road? He had this voice of God, deep voice.
I know who you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
So every once in a while, you'll have somebody who will just stumble into a supermarket, and this voice will pop up out of nowhere, and then they sort of get scooped up for a while.
Yeah. Well, an engineer, a wise engineer, once said something. He said, "It ain't the voice; it's the interp," meaning interpretation.
Right.
And back to Don LaFontaine, a lot of the guys had this kind of voice, but they could not bring that indefinable thing to the copy that he did because of his background, and that's why he was successful as he was.
As you are as well, Neil, and it was a pleasure having you here chatting with us for a little over 2 hours. Could you imagine that? It was just like we're having a cup of coffee in the studio and shooting the breeze, learning about it all and your phenomenal career. And it really is amazing the work you've done and the breadth of work and the variety, and still doing it. Knowing myself, the difficulties and blood, sweat, and tears and hours and craziness and all of it, like we've talked about tonight, you're still there. You're still doing it. You still love the work. It's, a passion of yours, and you've inspired a lot of people through the work, probably more than you'll ever know. And it's extraordinary, and we really appreciate everything and wish you nothing but continued success, continued blessing in your life, Neil, and gargle often.
Yeah, oh yeah. Can I just mention, if anyone has the slightest interest in the book, best thing to do is to go to neilbook.com, neilbook.com, or put Neil Ross vocal recall into Mr. Google, and I'm sure he'll send you somewhere. It's available in print, it's Kindle, it's audio, whatever you want.
Whatever you want, he's got it.
For $1 million, I'll come over to your house and read it to you while you're going to sleep.
Oh, that's nice.
So, yeah.
That's a step up from the 300 in Honolulu.
Yeah.
Anne says, time went very fast. It's been informative and amazing evening. Thank you, Neil. Bernadette says, thank you, Neil, for your time and sharing your stories. We enjoy your work. Christopher says, great show. Renee Katz says, experience and training needs to be valued. Lots of chutzpah and luck. I prefer the former. Kathy Short says, Neil, this was very, very interesting. Good stuff, my friend. I would love, if I'm out that way again, because sometimes I'm brought out there for television shoots, to when we can get together and have lunch and chat with you. That would be an honor and a real pleasure. Marcia says, thank you for the time and great advice. And Mary Bishop says, great time, Neil. Be safe. Pete White, who was raving about the book earlier, 2 hours flew by. Thank you. Mary Bishop, great time, Neil. Good stuff. All right. And,
thank you, one and all. I appreciate it. Very
it is absolutely my pleasure. I hope the show met your expectations and you enjoyed the time with me as much as I certainly have with you, Neil.
The time has flown. I hardly knew it was 2 hours. Could have been 20 minutes.
And Renee Katz says, good luck to you. You still have so much to share. That's a beautiful statement. Thank you, Neil and Jim. Thanks, Neil. Keep your chin up, Neil. When you least expect it, it will happen. Good night, Neil. Keep teaching and showing. Okay. You will be remembered for that as well. Beautifully said. Well, this is a wrap. Portions of these broadcasts were not recorded. And we will see you again soon, my friend. You take care. You be well. And anybody wants to watch this, they can see the whole show on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. And appreciate everything. The book, you said, is it also on Amazon? Did you say Amazon?
Yes, it's at Amazon.
And we're live.
Can I do that 3 in a row and you pick the best take? No,
that's it.
It's at Amazon.
That was
Amazon.
That's what you call a spit take.
Yeah.
I'll show the book again before we wrap. But Neil, my friend, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And you enjoy the rest of your evening. And we'll talk again soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Jim. I've really appreciated it. Take care, everybody.
My
Stay
pleasure.
safe, stay well, wear a mask.
Yes. Bernadette's running to purchase the book right now, she says. Perfect. Excellent.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you.
You have a good night, Neil. Take care now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Very special guest. And yes, I agree. What a voice. Absolutely. And what a personality. And what a guy. And he shared something maybe that might be new to you. I'm very familiar with it working in this industry, but I thought it was kind of cool to have a veteran, legendary British American voice actor and announcer who has worked for years in radio, as he shared, and started off small and worked his way up and then got into the voiceover world. And as we mentioned earlier, some of the incredible work voicing, animated characters on television and voiceover character narrations, documentaries, done voice work on Seinfeld just recently, the announcer for the reboot of the CBS game show Press Your Luck. He was also the voice of Whammy, did voice for PBS and Nova, the movie Back to the Future, all these video games, Call of Duty and Metal Gear and Doom 3 and Mass Effect. I mean, he's touched everything, announcing for the Emmy Awards shows and the Oscars and so much more. The list goes on and on. He's very humble, as you can see, and but a great guy and really cool voices. And you got a chance to hear some of his voices with the clips that we showed. If you missed anything tonight and joined us late, you can watch this whole episode again on YouTube at Jim Masters TV, a veteran in the voiceover and television, radio industry, and so much more, and a very humble guy. And it was really cool. I'm sure for some of you, you learned a little bit more about how that works. So now when you hear these voices on video games and cartoons and commercials and promos and things of that nature, you'll think about the people behind the scenes and all the work it takes to do that work. You think you just grab a script and just say the lines, but there's so much work. I've done a lot of it myself. There's so much work and hours and time that go into it. And a lot of people do it out of their home studios. I do daily radio shows out of the house too with our home studio. It's a new way that things are shifting. But again, some really cool projects that so many people know he's been involved in. And that was just really the short list. I mean, he's been involved with so many incredible productions and projects and gigs. He's a straight shooter too, and I like his dry wit. I mentioned that when we were putting this conversation together for him to be a special guest on the Jim Masters Show Live. It was really cool. Kathleen, thank you very much for saying really cool voices, good show as well. And Rini says, I'm sure the book is great. And Jim, do we get to see the photos some celebrity sent in for the Halloween show? No, we aren't doing that show. We may come up with something else. I had a television project, speaking of this industry, television project that popped up, which was very important on Saturday. So duty called and we had to go to that on Saturdays. But we may, if we have time to put all that together, we may in a later show or pop-up show try to squeeze in some of those pictures as we go along. We don't have anything formatted right now because all of the shows for this week are already formatted. And then I've got a very busy week on the air with my radio shows and some television work. So nothing right now. That was really for Halloween, but we might be able to squeeze something in if we have the time to put something together. That would be kind of cool. I do want to remind everybody, we have an amazing guest tomorrow, live and direct from London, international classical and Irish flautist Muir McGoon. She's extraordinary. She's award-winning. She's a brilliant talent, beautiful inside and out. Personal friend as well. She's going to perform live. And our show tomorrow is 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And that's 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, and England. And we're doing the show earlier tomorrow. That way there's some of her fans and followers of her incredible work and musicianship will be able to tune in live as well. So this will be 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, and in England, 3 p.m. here, Eastern time, noon tomorrow Pacific. It's going to be exclusively tomorrow. We are exclusively on YouTube, not Facebook. So join us on YouTube. Be sure and subscribe to the channel if you can. www.youtube.com/Jim Masters TV. That's where we will be tomorrow on YouTube exclusively. So no show at 7 o'clock. We're going to be doing the show at 3 p.m. Eastern. Again, the reason why we're doing it early is because for Amir in London, it's going to be 8 o'clock at night. So, if we started the show at 7 o'clock Eastern, it would be midnight for her and her fans, and that's a little late. So we're adjusting the time so everybody around the world gets a chance to watch us. It's going to be earlier for people in Germany and Switzerland and really so many other places. So it'll be great. And if you miss it, it'll be archived on our YouTube channel as well. That is tomorrow. And we're looking forward to that tomorrow as well. A bevy of amazing guests coming up. I just want to show you again on Saturday, very popular singer-songwriter. He's 21 years old. This is Oscar Blue, live from Dublin on Saturday. That's going to also be 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, and 8 p.m. for Ireland, Scotland, and England. He's in Ireland, so we wanted to make sure his fans can see the show live as well. So we're going to do the show this Saturday, the 7th of November, live, 3 p.m. Eastern, as opposed to the evening show, noon Pacific. And we'll mention this again, but you can see it all on the Facebook page and on YouTube. This will be exclusively right there on the YouTube channel this Saturday. It's going to be incredible. He's also going to perform live as well. Again, he's very popular in Europe and Ireland right now, and he just came out with a new CD. He's a great singer-songwriter. This is Oscar Blue, and he's excited to be here. He's going to perform live for us on our YouTube channel for the Jim Master Show Live. There is the channel address, so make sure you check it out. That'll be coming up on Saturday. I want to let you know also, we have Bruce Guyen, who's coming on Thursday, and he is with the incredible group Big Rain, folk and rock and country and a whole host, soul and a whole host of incredible music. He's going to perform live. He's all very excited. That will be joining us on Thursday as well. On November 11th, which isn't that far from now, Glenn Scarpelli, who starred in the 1970s CBS series One Day at a Time, he's going to be joining us here on the show on November 11th. That's on a Wednesday. I think that's Veterans Day. 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. That'll be on YouTube and on Facebook. Phil Coulter, legendary Phil Coulter, is going to be here on Sunday, November 15th. Platinum, multi-platinum selling recording artist, musician, songwriter, live from Dublin, Ireland. He's going to be here as well. And Darren Holden, from originally with Riverdance, still with the High Kings, and a terrific singer-songwriter. I interviewed him many times on public television, emceed several of the High Kings concerts when they've been here in the States. Darren Holden will be here on December 3rd. These are just some upcoming guests that we have that a lot of people are very excited about. He will be live from Ireland as well, which is kind of cool and very exciting. And we're looking forward to that. And Oscar is great. You are right. Oscar is fantastic, fantastic. And no show on Tuesday. We're skipping Tuesday. We're taking the day off Tuesday because everybody is going to be involved with the election, either voting, get out and vote, and of course everybody's going to be watching all the live coverage, and I will be watching the live coverage as well. So no show on Tuesday. We are taking the Tuesday off. I'm busy actually on the air on the radio shows that I host with Close Up Television and Radio out of New York. So no show on Tuesday. It is Election Day in the United States, a very, very crucial and important day. So get out and vote if you haven't already. And that's that. So no show on Tuesday. We're taking Tuesday off. Our show will be tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be doing some adjustments to some of our times based on where the guests are. So we will try to announce some of that early for you guys so you don't miss anything. And again, some of the guests are in different time zones, and we want their viewers to be able to, and their fans to be able to join us on our show here with all of our fans and viewers and lovities, all of you. So everybody gets to watch live, so they can participate too with comments and things of that nature. They can always watch it later, which a lot of people do. They binge on the YouTube channel, but some of them might want to ask questions, and, you know, like you guys do, ask questions and comment and participate as well. Good night, friends and lovities. Stay safe, stay well. Yes, Oscar Blue is great. He's Saturday, 3 p.m. on YouTube. Again, wonderful Irish flautist. She is terrific. She's very funny. She's phenomenal. Again, I love her, and she's really amazing. Amelia Magoon is going to be here 3 p.m. Eastern. That is on our YouTube channel tomorrow. 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. Western European time, which is Ireland, Scotland, and England. Again, she's of Irish heritage, but she lives in London, and she's going to be with us and performing live from London tomorrow. And that's going to be great for a lot of people in Europe, where when we start our show at 7 o'clock at night, it's like midnight or 1 a.m. for them. Now, we've had an hour back time change here in America, but some countries in Europe haven't done that, so it's even later for them. Darren Holden's going to be great as well. Great shows to look forward to, absolutely. A lot of work putting these shows together every night, but we're loving doing it. Have a great night, you as well. Yes, no show Tuesday. See you guys tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Absolutely. Yeah, we had already decided no show Tuesday. It's election day. Everybody's going to be concentrating on that. Plus, we didn't want to compete with election night. I mean, I'd be standing here doing this show saying, I want to be watching TV, seeing what's going on. And my family and my friends and colleagues, we're going to be glued to the television, radio, and following what's going on here in the United States. A big election coming up. So there's the YouTube channel. There's where we will be tomorrow. Your friends are here. They say goodnight. George Burns and Jeannie. And some of you have been asking about Lin. Oh, here's Jeannie. Jeannie's in the bottle saying goodnight to you as well. Since, you know, we've been talking about voiceovers and animation and all that tonight, good night to show the cast characters too. Gilligan in there saying good night for you as well. And Silver from Switzerland says good night to you as well. Good night from Silver. They're all always here. They surround me here on set. And of course, Jimmy, I know you guys always look for Jimmy. Jimmy says good night as well. And for those of you that have been looking for that huge panda, Lin. Oh, by the way, all the cookies that I got from wonderful guest and dear friend Tesla Bella, all the chocolate chip cookies that I showed you just the other day, gone, long gone. They didn't last very long. Whew. Especially when you have like 5 or 6 at a time. They didn't last very long at all, but they were so good, so delicious. Lin is right there. So those who've been asking about Lin, that tremendous panda, Lin is here. Wanted to, you guys have been asking for Lin, so I said, we'll try to get Lin on set tonight, since we've been talking about voiceovers and animation and cool things like that. So there is your friend Lin saying hello. All right. You have a good night, Lin. Lin's usually on the comfy chair over there, but we're going to wrap up, gang. We thank once again our very special guest, Neil Ross. We thank you for your time, and we hope you had a good time with us here tonight. What was tonight's drink? We had it right here. Just a nice hot cup of, still some in there. It's cold now, but hot chocolate. Rainy and windy here today. Real fall-like weather, but it was a good day, and I hope you had a good day, and I hope you had a good weekend and a good Halloween, and love having you guys here. Thanks for all the comments and all the support and all the levity and everything. And we're working hard putting some cool shows together, and it's always a pleasure knowing you guys are here. We have so many cool things planned for upcoming weeks and holidays, and a lot of cool things that we're working on as well. Also, if you have a suggestion for a guest, a lot of people have been spreading the word. You can always drop us a note at jimmasterstv@gmail.com. That's jimmasterstv@gmail.com if you have an idea for guests. We have lots of people that we're responding to, and we try to keep on that. Sometimes we can't always jump because we're balancing a lot of things, but we try to get to as many people as possible. And there's a lot of people that are just wanting to hop on the show, and we appreciate that as well. So, and we'll try to see what we can do. Some of the photos that people send in for Halloween, maybe we can do a pop-up show. We can do a host chat show where we talk about food and we talk about life and we talk about inspiration, and we'll show some of those costume photos and try to squeeze that in somewhere else. I'll keep you posted on that. We'll try to work on something like that for all of you fabulous lovities here on the Jim Masters Show Live. All right. Again, tomorrow we're going to be here on YouTube exclusively at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. in Ireland, Scotland, and England. I think in Netherlands, places like that, it's going to be only 9 p.m. So that'll be good. And good stuff. And yeah. Bernadette says she's a lovely flautist. Yeah, she's terrific. And we actually worked on a public television special together with our dear friend Tim Janis called Celtic Heart, which was really beautiful, shot and filmed in Maine, and then also elements in Ireland as well. All right. Cheers to all of you with a nice mug of hot chocolate. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. It's always great having an opportunity to check in with all of you from around the world. We thank you for your time. We hope you have a wonderful day on Monday. We'll be here on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. Again, there is the YouTube channel. Just repeating again in case people didn't hear it. And they look for us on Facebook tomorrow. Tomorrow it's exclusively on YouTube on our channel. So join us there at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific tomorrow. And if you miss it, it'll be recorded and available for viewing throughout, the day and beyond on the YouTube channel. All right. Love hot chocolate. You too. Cheers to you, Kathleen. We're going to have to reheat this because it's now cold chocolate. It's been sitting over there while I was chatting with Neil. Wishing everyone a good night and restful sleep. We'll try and tune in tomorrow. Otherwise, looking forward to Wednesday. Hope you have a great day tomorrow. Thank you, Jim, for all your efforts and hard work. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff, gang. Love you all. You have a good night. Thanks for being with us on this episode of the Jim Masters Show Live. See you tomorrow, 3 p.m. over on YouTube. We have a good time. Lots of live music and lots of crack, lots of Irish crack. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.